Well, guys, I tried to set up the tripod for you to try to film this a little bit easier, but that didn't work out so well. So, hang in with me because the producer of Hustlin Horsepower isn't all that great, okay? But these bars right here are very, very critical, okay? This is, we'll call it something like the error of deviation, okay? If you have any type of deviation, okay? Let's step this back about, okay? There's right, and then there's how far you're willing to go from right, okay? And in my opinion, these parts of the chassis, they have to be right, okay? So I'm pretty particular on these aspects of the chassis, simply because if you're off a 1/10 of 1 degree, like 0.1 of 1 degree, the next one that you're off 0.1 of 1 degree, now you're off that margin of error, okay? It just multiplies, okay? So it's very crucial to have that stuff fit properly, okay? Now, when you're doing the TIG welding and stuff like that, I'm gonna sit down for a second here. When you're doing the TIG welding and stuff like that, it is very crucial to have all your fitments really, really tight, okay? And I want to talk about, I'll talk in the next video or something like that, or maybe later on in this video, or however I work out, about back cutting your joints, okay? When you use a hole saw, let's say you're cutting something like 120 wall, okay? This is a 083 wall, so I guess we'll use a 083 wall. If you're using like a hole saw, okay, you got to back cut your joints. The reason for that is the center of that cut, okay, the apex of that cut is 120 thousandths thick. Where it breaks through is 0. Halfway through there is essentially half the thickness of the material, right? Because that's how a saw works, okay? So if you don't back cut, sand those edges out so that you're welding to 120 thousandths thick, you're gonna have some really weak joints in there, okay? And in my opinion, the weld isn't really supposed to hold the structure together, okay? Of course it does, but the fitment of your joints, okay, is like a puzzle, okay? A well-built structure can sustain itself with no bolts in it, okay? Because it's kind of like the lattice, or like how pieces work in geometry, right? Now, if you have pieces that are all working together, the weld is essentially holding it in place and not holding it from breaking, okay? That's why I do a lot of things the way I do, and you'll see them throughout the videos of the reason why I do them that way, okay? Of course, your welds have to be good, but if you build the car properly, okay, in my opinion, this is all from my personal opinion, okay? If you build the car in a certain way, it relieves a lot of potential stress points and a lot of potential failures in a chassis by intricating or paying attention to the way the bars go, okay? It's simple, very easy to connect a bar to a bar, but there's a reason why bars have to go in certain ways. And there's a reason why bars have to line up in certain directions, and the forces of the chassis and how the chassis is trying to work, okay? And that's an art form that is all in itself, okay? Is trying to figure out how to make a chassis work, okay? There's times when you could have a chassis too stiff. There's times when you have a chassis too flexible, okay? There is such things as that, okay? Something like a blower car versus a nitrous car, those are two different types of chassis and stuff like that. There's the different amount of bars and the way they position those bars and stuff like that. Of course, you got to have all your safety bars, but as far as the thickness of certain tubings and the placement of certain tubings, you want to have the chassis working in different areas, okay? So, this isn't like the brag or nothing like that, but like your joints, okay? If your joint doesn't fit like that, if you can fit something like, I might have lost it. If you can fit, here's a piece of filler rod, okay? 16th filler rod, okay? If you can go in here and fit your filler rod and then your cracks or crevices, okay, you're screwing up. That's my personal opinion. Of course, they do make thick filler rod that you can fill a gap with or stuff like that, but that loses a lot of the integrity of the chassis, okay? Then you have to put more heat into that tube, and when you put more heat into a tube, you metallurgy and stuff like that, right? You don't want to put friggin' 120 amps into this tubing. Generally, welding steel, it's about 1 amp per thousandths If you see my welder in the background, I have it set up at 100 amps. I have it set up as 100 amps because I can get the heat into the puddle quickly. Then I back off the pedal and work the pedal, okay? You'll also see me using pulse and stuff like that sometimes. That is simply because I'll cheat in any way, shape, or form I can to produce the best weld I can, okay? I'm not a professional welder. I don't have good feelings in my hands. So I will do anything and everything I can to produce a good quality weld. Now, of course, you're going to look at something like the charge pipes and stuff like that on Altered Intentions or on the Homegrown Hustlin and be like, oh, those welds are friggin' awful. You're right, because I didn't have the money and I reused friggin' tubing that went through the fire of the Dirty 30. That stuff was like literally my oil pan. I literally had to seal it up with JB Weld because it was a sand cast aluminum pan, and that fire got so hot that it literally made that oil pan leak because of the sand casting in it. That's real stuff, okay? So on this car, I want this car to represent myself to the best of my ability, okay? So we're gonna be using, we'll go and source some new aluminum tubing and stuff like that to do the charge pipes with. I'm gonna still reuse my headers that I built for the Dirty 30, and we use them in the Homegrown Hustler because the firewall distance is the same width and the turbos are gonna be in the same location because that location works pretty well. But this is getting back to the chassis stuff. You got to have all your fitments nice and tight, okay? If you have sloppiness or misorientation early in the stages of building a car, you're really going to run into issues down the road, okay? So take the time and do it right. And like I said earlier in our last video or whatever, like do whatever you can to cheat, you know, doing like something like these bolts right here with a strap to help index the tubes. All that stuff helps, okay? I use a lot. You'll see me using these spring clamps everywhere. That's because God only gave me 2 hands, okay? As a little kid, I probably would have gotten upset, getting made fun of in school, only having 2 hands. But I'm telling you, having like 4 arms would have been very beneficial in my adult life, okay? So, since I'm not an octopus, I use a lot of clamps. And I recommend, they're like a couple bucks a piece. Go buy a ton of them. And spring clamps. The nice thing about like clamps like these, you could use them with 1 hand. So you could use 1 hand to film and 1 hand to experiment. Okay? No, but in all actuality, you could hold a bar in place and use the squeeze clamps. You'll see them all over the chassis. Okay? I left a bunch of them up in New York, I think. So I gotta go buy some more probably. But those are things that I'll do and use frequently. I'll set them up to rest my hand to weld and stuff like that. So all that stuff is very, very important. But I'm going to get back to doing the A-pillar bars now that I got this tacked in. I'll put a couple more tacks in. I got 3 tacks in it. I usually like to do 6 tacks in it, 8 tacks in it, just to make sure it's nice and steady. But this is at 90 degrees to this. This is 90 degrees to this. This number 1 bar, this, and this are all within 0.05 of 1 degree. That is a half of a tenth of a degree. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. I explained that wrong. Sorry, guys. It is what it is. But time to get back to it.